Good day today, June 20th, 2018, live from Neo 420 Studios. We're here today with a special guest, a good friend of ours from Can Research, Mr. Todd Dalotto. Good day, Todd. How are you doing?
Very good. That's Todd Dalotto.
Dalotto. I appreciate the correction on that pronunciation.
All right.
Todd, what's your role with Can Research? If you can give us a little background before we jump into the interview.
Sure. Well, I'm the president and founder, and I'm a horticultural scientist and science educator specializing in cannabis, sustainable agriculture, and plant breeding.
Oh, great. That's a very diverse topic or coverage that you provide there for us. I was looking at the website and very interested about the different, I love how you've offered these courses, online, at the click of a button for people who are interested in this type of education. Can you tell me a little bit of, tell us and our audience about your background and kind of what you got you into this space?
Well, sure. Yeah, science has always been a big charge of mine. And I got into the cannabis industries first as a food and environmental scientist. And I founded the U.S.'s first hemp food business, Hungry Bear Hemp Foods, in Eugene back in '93. And
Wow.
and so I've been doing horticultural work since then. I've got a horticultural research degree from Oregon State University, and I've been into plant breeding, horticultural research, and so I've been breeding inbred lines for about 20 years now, and that's sort of the long route to breeding stabilized plants. And so so basically overall, what drives me the most is sustainability. That's what got me into cannabis in the first place. Was that cannabis as a crop is probably humankind's best opportunity for for a sustainable agriculture, to meet the needs of our present generation without compromising the future of the future generations. So in terms of resource management, reduction of pollution, natural resources, that's always been my focus of cannabis as an opportunity to help enhance personal and planetary health. And so that continues in this day and age when cannabis licensing and regulation is becoming widespread. It's really important, as the farms are getting bigger, that we need to manage them better. We need to, back in the illegal market days when growers were getting $5,000 a pound, it was easy to throw a lot of money into a grow operation. But now it's high competition. The prices have dropped, and so we need to be figuring out ways to produce cannabis not only cheaper, so we builds a better business model, but those economic drivers also make a lot of sense in terms of sustainability and sustainable design. Okay, so where we save natural resources, where we save energy, where we enhance mutualistic relationships with insects and microbes, so that we get better pest management and disease management, then we don't have to spend money on pesticides. So a lot of the environmental goals, line up with economic goals too. So that's a big part of my focus here. And doing that, doing my education programs is not only one of the most effective ways to do that, but education also brings me a lot of joy as well. And so I got my cannabis horticultural science course, is kind of the flagship of my education program. It's a 20-hour course that dives into the science behind, it's not a how-to course like most courses out there are. We do discuss many of the techniques and methods, but we discuss them in the context of the science behind how they work. So if you want to learn how the nuts and bolts work, you take this class, and then you can look at any type of technique or growing method or growing environment, and you'll have a scientific basis to knowing how that works and how to improve it better. And so that's really my my driver behind it. I also teach a lot of other horticulturally related classes, like cannabis horticulture for retailers, to help bud tenders understand the plant a little better. And so, yeah, you could find a whole list of those educational offerings at canresearch.net/education. And my video library is at video.canresearch.net.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those sites. That's very interesting what you were discussing about the sustainable aspect of, that drove you into this line of research. My background is in sustainability from environmental service management, and people always argued about the cost compared to the environmental risks. And every single time that I've analyzed a system, when it came down to those two parts, it always made financial sense to do the environmentally sound thing. It was more of not a 1-year plan, it was a 3-year plan possibly, but you always were ahead. You were always ahead. Economically, from an operations standpoint, and from a business model, it always helps because it's something that you can market yourself on, right? That you're sustainable, you're eco-friendly, and in this space, as we know, we've seen here with Neo 420, talks, we have looked at all types of different things that are happening, specifically in California, with a lot of the rogue grows that were happening down there, not specifically in any area, but there was a lot of guerrilla grows that were happening that were just being major environmental hazards that were created. So I really applaud you for taking that leadership role and starting to discuss it in that manner. I think that's brilliant. As far as you mentioned a term that I have not heard before. Did you say inline breeding? Inbred
lines is the term.
Inbred lines.
Yep.
What does that mean specifically?
Okay, so inbred lines means brothers and sisters mating, and so the goal is to get all of the progeny, the kids, to breed true, to have each generation to have similar characteristics. So that way, when you buy a seed, from the consumer standpoint, you buy a seed, it'll look just like the picture in the catalog,
right?
And it'll probably have a similar cannabinoid and phytochemical. So it would be similar to buying a clone. Okay. As you probably know, when you buy a seed, a packet of seeds, currently of just about any cannabis cultivar, maybe some of them will look alike. But you'll get a pretty good diversity of phenotype typical expression, and that is because almost all the cannabis that's bred currently are polyhybrid crosses. That means they're a cross of a cross of a cross of a cross of a cross, and so it doesn't really take a lot of know-how to do that type of breeding. All you do is take one cool plant, cross it with another cool plant, and if it makes another cool plant, then you give it a cool name, and you got a strain. And so it's
exactly what's happening.
Yeah, it really. But amazingly, through that, we've cannabis growers have come up with some pretty amazing genetic improvement and some amazing cultivars.
Absolutely.
So it really doesn't take a lot of brains to really get a good product. But what you have when you have that polyhybrid cross is a very unstable breeding line. It means
right.
if you grow and take a brother and sister from those seeds and you cross it again, then you've jumbled up all of the genetic traits, and you can get a wide variety of phenotypical expression, which is great for a breeder because you have a lot of different trait combinations to select from. But if
right.
you're that grower who wants that that plant that to look just like it looks like in the picture and give you the phytocannabinoid ratios that you expect, then you either want a clone or an inbred line. And so inbred lines, you need to inbreed them. You know, once you've found the characteristics, the trait combinations you want, then you breed the brothers and sisters, and then you select from that progeny you select the plants that have the greatest number of trait combinations that you want. And then you keep inbreeding those, and then it keeps getting more uniform and more uniform until you get to about the 6th or 7th generation, when you get a high degree of uniformity, and at that point you could call it an inbred line. But you've got to make sure at every selection that you've selected for all the traits that you want to end up in your final product. You could do that by visual observation, or you can do it by what we call marker-assisted breeding, and that's when you actually do a DNA test to find out if the gene that you want actually got transferred to the progeny. And in order to do that, we need to have a well-mapped cannabis genome, and that's what a lot of companies like Phylos Bioscience and Medigene and Medicinal Biomics, these companies are in the process of mapping the cannabis genome so that we can say, oh, that trait for purple pistils goes here on this chromosome and is this many base pairs. And so when that science gets a little bit more developed, we'll be able to look at any of our desirable characteristics and do a genetic test to see if it made it in its progeny. And that speeds up breeding incredibly fast. So a lot of really interesting breeding tools available.
That is so interesting. Thank you for sharing with that. Like I said, I've known, I didn't know the term for it, but that's very interesting in the sense that from a patient standpoint, if I want to go to get my medicine, I always want the same medicine also, right? So if I'm wanting to go get something that's very effective for my biology, then whenever I go towards getting it the second time and it's a little different, that sometimes gives us on the medical side as a patient a little bit of concern. So what you're talking about gives me a lot of confidence that we can have a little bit more stabilization of medicine that's provided consistently. So that's really encouraging to know that that's in the pipelines right now.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's very exciting. So, you said you've been working on that type of research for a couple of decades?
Yeah, about 20 years. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are there cultivars now that are inline bred that are available?
I don't know of any that are widespread available. The only ones historically that I know that have been out there have been some of the old classics like Skunk Number 7, Colombian Gold, some of the old classic cultivars like that. But as far as I know, everything you see available for cannabis breeders or for cannabis seed sales is are polyhybrids, and so you're not likely to get a high degree of consistency with those. Yeah,
that's when we have to go pheno hunting, and it takes just so much time as far as on the operations standpoint. From the cultivator side, that's a big challenge because, as you stated, I mean, even when you get that pheno that you like, once you go to clone it and set it back, you still don't have any absolute certainty that even in the same exact conditions and the same exact facility that you're going to have the same exact results.
Right.
So that's very exciting. That's great news, and I'm going to keep my eyes out on that and start to do a little research myself.
Okay.
As far as the going back to your educational campaign, that's what Neo 420 is all about. That's why we started this organization. And diversified in the areas that we have is really as an educational and information source for the general public. So with your educational campaigns that you offer through Can Research, could you tell the audience, like, I got on the site and was just so encouraged because of how easy it is. Like, you really designed it from a user-friendly perspective, because it's just one click. You get to choose your different classes, right? And then you're able to take them at your own discretion and on leisure.
Yeah.
That's really
great.
Yeah. So how many do you have up at this time, approximately?
Well, I've got the full Cannabis Horticultural Science course, which is 10 2-hour classes. And then I've got the Cannabis Horticulture for Retailers. And then I've got a handful of free videos as well, some lectures and some other material.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's really great. I hope that our audience will go over to canresearch.net and check out those different offerings that Todd is offering with that, and the immense amount of research and education that you put behind that. I'm sure that it's going to be helpful for many. As we talk about the educational campaign for dispensaries, you mentioned about that's towards educating the bud tenders.
Yeah, it's really it's cannabis horticulture for retailers, but really it's useful for anyone in the cannabis industry who's a non-grower, to help you understand a little bit about cannabis horticulture. But particularly, I target it to retailers because they're the ones who are interacting with the consumers, nothing has me running for the door of a dispensary to exit, like a bud tender who doesn't know what they're talking about, or who is giving information that isn't correct. And so it really means a lot to the quality of a retailer or dispensary, and it's something that really has people coming back when they feel confident that the bud tender knows what they're doing. And then there's also the whole management and the buyers and everyone in the back office. If they're making good decisions about what cannabis to buy and how to market it and how to display it, then it really shines through as a high quality dispensary or retailer that'll keep people coming.
That's absolutely the case. Here in the market, close to Portland, we see a lot of signs, that are offering really cheaply priced flower material, and it really saddens me to see that because where the industry started and now where we're at currently, it's such a value to us as a general public that I hate to start seeing this pricing war start moving downward, because it devalues the whole system, right? And but what you say about there are dispensaries. I just visited one on Saturday that a friend of mine was at. It's a well-known breeder, and they were offering $12 grams up to $17 grams, even $20 grams, and that was their pricing structure. And even from a patient standpoint, I really appreciated them maintaining the integrity of the industry by pricing it to that level, because the quality of what they were offering on their shelves was some of the top-notch flower that I've seen. So it really is a big difference as far as what you're offering into your shop, as far as what type of business you're going to have and create, and it really marks the point of if you're going to be successful or not. We've seen a lot of businesses within this space that really do not function with traditional business practices and principles, and it kind of it makes it difficult for us to respond to that, because we don't know to work traditional business within that framework. So I really appreciate that you trying to lend some guidance to that retail side, as far as from the bud tenders, because like you said, there's nothing worse than to have misinformation provided from the bud tender, and they're the communications arm of the whole retail space, if you will. What do you have going on currently, Todd?
Oregon now is no longer the frontier, and we were once the frontier, and we were proud of it. But now that frontier has moved on to other states and other countries. So that's part of the impetus of putting my classes online to make it accessible for people in other states and all over the world to access this type of education. So I'm working more on that, and I'm also being invited to places like Colombia and Thailand to help bring some of my sustainable practices over there, because the South American and Asian markets, they're looking for low capital expense, low operating cost export market. They're looking to produce it cheaply and sell it cheaply on the world market, and which actually is right up my alley, because my system, the systems I've developed of cultivation, namely hoop house production, is the lowest capex and the lowest operating expense out of just about any type of growing environment. And so the system that I've developed actually works great in South America and Asia, with their climate and everything, but also with their financial goals. It's very low cost production, plus it's also very low risk in terms of pest and disease infestations. So it actually works well to get started in a system in South America that has sustainable design, because it's less costly, so it meets their economic goals.
Wow, that's interesting. Have you seen that the environmental standards, as you move abroad, have you seen that the environmental standards that we try to stick to here in the U.S. are embraced abroad, or are they catching up?
Well, yeah, some places, I mean, particularly Asia, it's there's some very intense, dense agricultural areas, and there's a lot of pesticide use and such. So just like the U.S., there's unsustainable agriculture everywhere.
Right.
And there are going to be people who are just looking to make a buck and will cut corners and engage in unsustainable practices. It's probably because they don't know about the opportunities for sustainable practices, and they may not know how economically viable it is to be sustainable.
Right.
And so that's of course more need for education. People could still make a lot of money by engaging in sustainable design. But yeah, we're kind of going up against that wherever you are in the world, and the better it's regulated for environmental sustainability, the better, the easier it is. So some South American countries will be more difficult than others to get people to really embrace sustainability. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as you said, even here in the States, I was down in Salinas, California, not very long ago, and there was some things that were happening with one of the people I was down there with, that their entire business model just got blown out of the water because they had airborne pesticides that were coming from a traditional agricultural farm, that they just could not, no matter which way that we looked at designing their facility, it just wasn't going to work unless they built a 1 million square foot indoor facility. And the costing just would not allow that to even take place, So it's unfortunate, because there are a lot of opportunities in these particular areas, but with some of the overlapping pesticide uses from traditional agriculture, it's impacting the new agriculture that we're talking about. So I've definitely seen it here stateside as well, like you said.
Yeah. California is a perfect example because you have, the #1 agricultural state, and yeah, pesticides do travel. It's really hard to get, truly organic crops of any type in California in general because there's always going to be some spray, some groundwater contamination, and so. So crops could pass organic standards, but if they're going to pass the stringent lab testing standards that cannabis has, it's going to be a much higher bar than the organic standards. So, yes, that's going to be a problem for a lot of cannabis growers in California. Yeah.
It definitely has created some. What do you in the future? I mean, I'm sure as much research as you're doing and have done over the decades, you're seeing the new movement into the hemp industry and a lot of evolution in Oregon. There, lots of hemp farming going on now. I was just reading an article recently that was suggesting that throughout the United States, we will potentially have over 50,000 acres of hemp cultivation 2017, this calendar year. Have you paid much attention to what's going on in the hemp industry?
Yeah, there actually isn't very much hemp being grown in the U.S., hardly any. The acreage you're talking about is all CBD production, and it's grown under industrial hemp licenses, but they're not growing hemp. But yeah, I am very much in touch with those parts of the cannabis industry. I do some breeding for high CBD cultivars that are geared towards the industrial hemp regulations. And yeah, that's probably the biggest growth area of cannabis right now. In Oregon, we're seeing a massive oversupply of the adult use and medical markets. But as much CBD crop as we could grow here, it gets sold. So I don't know when we're going to hit the glass ceiling on that one, but yeah, I like to see it happening. It's with CBD crops, we're hopefully seeing cannabis to be looked at more as a vegetable than a drug or even an herbal supplement.
Oh wow,
That's an interesting perspective. Saying that there's what would be the argument that you would make to start looking at it more of a vegetable crop compared to a botanical extract or a crop that's used for those purposes?
Well, I'd say both in the way people consume it. When people move away from using extracts and concentrates and and very dialed in very dialed in doses, and they're more into drinking beverages, juicing, using it in their foods without a very measured dose. Then people are just consuming it to keep a high blood concentration of CBD, which is good.
Yeah.
But when you're measuring all your doses and extracting it, and that's looked at more of an herbal supplement, which is great too. But and then on the agricultural side, a lot of the harvest, the cultivation techniques and the harvesting and post-harvest processing will be more vegetable-like than it will be, herbal-like, in the future. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's so interesting because, as I mentioned, with my background in sustainable environmental science and renewable energy, I'm always looking at, the potential for fuel crops, not food crops, but fuel. And I've been talking with a gentleman out in Mississippi that has an interesting technology that he's looking to deploy within the hemp industry to help potentially deal with some of the kind of the leftover material that's been overlooked. Not the flower, not the sugar leaves, but more of the stalk and root side of it. So it's very interesting to see that now with the availability of hemp and cannabis, it's starting to, there's an innovation that's coming about around technologies that can help with particular components of utilizing that crop in a different way. And I'm really interested to see where that goes, because if we go back to history, like with the initial Henry Ford car, being made out of those hemp plastics, and now we're looking at ethanol. We're already pumping ethanol into our vehicles from corn, and we know that we can produce fuels from hemp seed and other biomass. So, with the cultivation period of hemp being, potentially like 100 days, it's a very, very interesting idea as far as not only for medicine, not only for food, but also for fuel. It's an interesting idea. I think we're at the precipice of the hemp revolution happening again.
Yeah, exactly. And so technology is, and the infrastructure is really going to help launch us forward, particularly in fiber production. That's the big bottleneck with fiber, is that if we're really going to make an impact by replacing tree fiber with hemp fiber and replacing cotton with hemp fiber, we need to either build multi-million-dollar production facilities, or we need to retool the existing pulp mills and lumber mills. And in order to do that, we need to guarantee that those mills will be fed, and we need thousands of acres nearby a mill in order to keep that mill fed with fiber. And so fiber particularly needs technology and investments to really bring it over the edge. A lot of the other products, Canada found that out, really quick. The most lucrative cannabis crop and hemp crop in Canada is nutritional seed. There isn't much going on in terms of fiber in Canada. It's the yield per the revenue per acre is really in the seed oil.
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting to me, just how quickly Canada moved. I can remember back in the 90s, back in high school, some of the things that whenever you would see, Sensimilla cannabis, we always called it beasters or BC buds, right? But they were so far ahead of us in that movement. But I guess, I'm thinking because of their climates and their seasons of agriculture, that they weren't really able to move heavily forward with their hemp programs. And, obviously because of legality at that time. But now, so things are starting to really shape up. And it's interesting when you were talking about Colombia and the Asian markets, Central America. I see it as these different climate areas being, different production area potentials, right? So if we're talking about, hemp seed, maybe it's good for a certain area. If it's hemp fiber, maybe it's better for a certain area. If it's hemp fuel, then it's maybe, better for a certain area. Each one of them has different moistures that can be allowed for that particular crop, right? Is that a fair assumption?
Yeah. I think the sweet spot of cannabis is right where we are. Around latitude 45. This belt that kind of goes around the world at this latitude is is where cannabis had its botanical origins and some of its greatest production. And so, but cannabis, of course, is globally appreciated.
Right.
So to grow cannabis on the equator requires adaptation of the cultivar, and so, but yeah, you are correct, is that we need to be looking at every agricultural region as maybe being more appropriate for one type of crop or another. And so when we're regulating, when we're legalizing places for the first time, those are the best opportunities to get regulations in place in order to have control areas, because control area, because obviously if we want a vibrant hemp fiber industry, that's going to produce a lot of pollen, and so that's not going to make the marijuana producers or breeders or any other crop happy. And so, but we need to grow hemp for fiber, for our planet's needs. So we need to find places, like in Oregon, Daryl Ahrenslang, he did a feasibility study about 20 years ago on industrial hemp in Oregon, and he found the best regions to grow hemp are the Columbia and Snake River valleys. Well, we have a lot of agriculture there, but we don't have a lot of people. So those would be the ideal regions to have hemp fiber industry, because the pollen can just blow as it pleases, and it's not going to bother any marijuana growers. But then we need to look at places like the Applegate Valley, the Rogue Valley, the Willamette Valley, and most of Western Oregon. We have all of these areas that have a history of growing good cannabis, and not just growing good cannabis in those areas, but you also have a terroir or Appalachia, where you have growers that kind of share characteristics of the way they grow, and so this creates very valuable distinctiveness among cannabis. And so you want to protect those areas and make it not legal to grow a fiber hemp there, or any crop that's going to produce a lot of pollen, because we have a very valuable resource, and which can be threatened by pollen. And so every use of cannabis is incredibly valuable. So we need to protect that by establishing control areas so that we keep the pollen where it belongs and let everyone else thrive. Yeah.
And when we're talking about technology selection in any business, we're always thinking about appropriate technology, right? It's not that there's really one answer, but when you start defining what your direction is, what your outcome results are desired, then you start talking about appropriate technology. Yep. And what you're describing is like appropriate demographic or appropriate region, right? To where you have like all of these different climate studies, rainfall studies, weather patterns. We can almost pinpoint, like you just detailed so great, the here in Oregon, as far as defining those spots. I think that's possible to be done around the country, and identify where those particular areas are that are not in competition with food crops or not in competition with populated areas, So that's really brilliant. Looking forward to seeing what happens. I mean, it's a very exciting time, right now in the agricultural industry, what's happening. I think there's a collective understanding that cannabis is helpful for medicinal purposes. I think that hemp is being more appreciated for the industrial potential that it has. and also the medicinal, as you said, from the CBD side, more of the medicinal aspects and benefits that are available. But I think that, it seems like we're at that point. I wasn't around during the first time that the U.S. made this move back in the 70s, but I think this time there is enough mass momentum and interest to where it's going to be something that we can look forward to, this being a moment to where it really started, even though you've been, working in it 20 years and so many other people have been putting so much effort. And I thank you, Todd, for all that you've done for the industry. I always like to be appreciative, and give respect to people like yourself that have put so much time and effort and energy into getting it to this point to help us start to understand it. Thank you.
Indeed, happy to. It's my pleasure.
Well, Todd, we're going to wrap up now with this interview, but I hope that we can schedule another one in the future to stay up to date on what you're doing. And again, anyone that wants to check out Todd's educational platform, go to canresearch.net. And Todd, is there any other places that people can check you out? On Facebook, maybe?
Yeah, I've got a couple Facebook pages. Can Research or Can Education has a page. Then I also have Can Research Community on Facebook.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep. And also my video library is at video.canresearch.net. And then I also do something else. Which is integrating a healthy lifestyle with cannabis. So I have this cannabis nutrition and superfoods and CBD kind of side business, and you can learn about that at phytofriends.com, phytofriend.com, and find out what that's all about.
Yeah, I'm going to definitely check that out. I know all of us here at Neo 420 are very interested in healthy living, so I'm going to definitely check that out because we've been debating about a couple of different things recently. So we're going to go there and check out some education. Hopefully, we can get on the right path. Thank you again, Todd, for giving us time here with Neo 420 Talks, the podcast talking all things cannabis and hemp, plus some other stuff. Until next time, Todd, we look forward to talking to you again. Until next time, friends, stay medicated.